She told me she was going to her sister's baby shower in Indiana. 3 days, Friday to Sunday, all girls. No husbands allowed. I didn't even blink. I packed her bag while she ran around the house looking for her hair curler, helped her carry it to the car, kissed her cheek through the rolled-down window. She barely looked at me, just muttered thanks, and backed out of the driveway with one hand on the wheel, already answering someone's message on her phone with a sly grin that wasn't meant for me. That was the moment, I think. The exact moment I knew something didn't fit. You know that stupid, dry, tightening feeling in your chest when your gut starts yelling and you pretend not to hear it? I had that, and it didn't leave all weekend. I walked around the house like it was a crime scene and I didn't yet know what had been stolen. Something in the air was just wrong. Saturday afternoon, I get a call from her sister. I'm thinking maybe she wants me to bring something they forgot. Maybe a charger or Ellie's old baby clothes. I answer it with a smile, try to sound relaxed. But her sister jumps right in. Hey, is she with you? I remember the exact sound the fridge made in that moment, the little hum it does before the motor kicks in. That, and the sound of my own voice freezing in my throat. What? Is she back early or something? I've been trying to call her since yesterday. I tell her no, that she told me she was with her. In Indiana. There's this pause. Long enough for both of us to understand something's gone sideways. She never came here, man. The call ended with her saying, maybe she'll call me back. Could be nothing. But it wasn't nothing. We both knew that. I didn't call Katie right away. I waited. I wanted to see if she'd lie. I wanted to watch the theater unfold. She texted me later that night. 10:47 p.m. Tired. Party ran long. Going to bed early. Love you. I stared at that message for a full 10 minutes. I wasn't even angry yet. I was still in that sickly, stunned space between suspicion and certainty. So I waited till Sunday. She came back in the afternoon, pulling into the driveway with makeup that looked too fresh for a 5-hour drive and a suitcase that smelled like expensive cologne. Not hers. Not mine. She didn't hug me. She went straight to the laundry room, dumped her stuff in the machine without letting me even touch it. That's when I noticed her phone wasn't in her hand. Katie's phone never left her hand. I walked past the bathroom, heard the shower running, walked quietly to her purse, slipped the phone out like I was stealing evidence, which in a way I was. No passcode. That was her mistake. The messages were right there, so many of them it felt like a slap. Pictures, videos, voice notes. She called him baby, told him she loved how he took charge last night, thanked him for not being boring like the one back home. The one back home. That's what I was now. A background character in her double life. But it gets worse. There was a picture she sent him that Saturday. She was wearing my shirt. The old gray one she always stole when we first started dating. She wore that in a hotel bed with him. I recognized the wallpaper downtown, not even far. She didn't even leave the city. And then I found it. A message from that same night. He still doesn't suspect anything. Thinks I'm in Indiana, lol. I didn't confront her right away. I didn't scream or throw anything. I just looked at her through the steam of the bathroom mirror. She stepped out with a towel around her, saw me holding her phone, and for the first time in all the years I knew her, she looked scared. That's how part 1 ends. Not with a bang. With silence. Her standing there dripping wet. Me holding her unlocked phone like a weapon I didn't ask for. And both of us knowing this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a fling. This was a war. And it had already started without me. She didn't say a word. Just stood there in the doorway, one hand clutching the towel at her chest, the other frozen mid-reach for a hairbrush she suddenly forgot she needed. Her face twisted in a weird combination of annoyance and fear, but mostly irritation. Like I had caught her in the middle of something important. She wasn't panicking because she hurt me. She was panicking because I ruined her timeline. I held up her phone. Not shaking. Not yelling. Just holding it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I read everything, I said. My voice wasn't mine. It was flat, quiet, too calm. She looked at me like I had just told her the grocery store ran out of eggs. Why were you going through my phone? That was the first thing she said. Not I'm sorry. Not let me explain. Not even it's not what it looks like. She came out swinging with a counterattack. Like I had violated her. Like I was the villain for discovering her betrayal. I know where you were, I said. I called your sister. You were never in Indiana. She rolled her eyes, walked past me, dripping water across the hardwood floor like nothing was happening, tossed her wet towel on the couch, and started pulling on a t-shirt, one of mine. You shouldn't have done that. That's private. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was surreal. She was standing in our living room, still half wet from a shower meant to wash another man off her skin, wearing my clothes, scolding me for invading her privacy. I know about the hotel, I said. That made her pause. Not for long. Just enough for her to exhale sharply and toss her hair back. You're being dramatic, she said. It was just one night. No, it wasn't. She went quiet again. So I laid it all out. Every message, every photo, every lie she'd texted from the bed we used to share. I told her I knew everything, even the stupid details. How she told him she loved the way he smelled. How she bragged that I'd never guess a thing. How she had planned to meet him again next week. This time while Ellie was at school. That was the moment I saw it. The shift in her eyes. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. She was done pretending. I was going to tell you, she said. But the tone was hollow. When? I asked. After the next hotel room? Or the one after that? I don't owe you a timeline. That's what she said. Word for word. I felt something harden in me. Something that would never soften again. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. A kind of brutal, final knowing. The end of the illusion. Was he the only one? I asked. She sat down, calmly, crossed her legs like she was on a talk show. No. No explanation. No apology. Just the word. I think I nodded. Not sure. My hands were numb. Then she said it. The sentence I will never forget. You're a good dad, but you're boring. I needed more. That was her reason. Not abuse. Not neglect. Not distance. Just boredom. And in that moment, something inside me broke so cleanly I almost heard it. I vanished from my wife and daughter's world. Her betrayal shattered everything. I slept in the car that night. Not because I had nowhere to go, but because I couldn't stand the idea of breathing the same air as her. I watched the house from the street, headlights off, trying to understand how the woman inside had become a stranger wrapped in the skin of someone I used to love. And the worst part? The lights in the bedroom went off around midnight. She didn't cry, didn't call me, didn't even check if I was gone. She just went to sleep, peacefully, like none of it ever mattered. The next morning, I didn't go back in the house. I sat in the parking lot of a strip mall 3 blocks away, drinking cold coffee out of a paper cup that tasted like cardboard and metal. I watched people coming and going, laughing, arguing over parking spots, carrying grocery bags, and I hated every single one of them for not knowing what it felt like to have your life gutted in silence. Not by a bullet or a fire or a car crash, but by a calm, calculated betrayal that unfolded in plain daylight while you thought you were building something that mattered. At 9:42 a.m., she texted me. We need to talk. Ellie's asking where you are. The gall of that message nearly made me laugh again. Not because it was funny, but because she dared to pull Ellie into it after what she did. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my buddy Trevor, my closest friend since high school, the only person who wouldn't feed me platitudes or coddle me with sympathy. I told him everything, all in one breathless, bitter rush, like tearing duct tape off raw skin. He said, "You coming here or am I coming to get you?" I ended up at his place, where we sat on his back porch and talked for 5 straight hours. I showed him the messages. I read the lines out loud, trying to kill the shame by making someone else witness it. He didn't interrupt. Didn't say damn or what a bitch like I expected. He just let me unravel. And when I was done, he asked the one question I hadn't let myself think about yet. What are you gonna do? The truth was I didn't know. I wanted to burn everything. File for divorce that minute. Tell Ellie everything. Cut Katie out of my life like a tumor. But another part of me, the one that had held my daughter the night she was born, the one that still believed family meant something, was paralyzed. I didn't want my little girl growing up in a war zone. I didn't want her to see the ugliness. Not yet. So I went home. Katie was in the kitchen, making pancakes like it was any other Sunday. She was wearing that same fake smile she'd been using on me for months, like she thought flipping breakfast was some kind of apology. Ellie ran to me and hugged my legs so tight I thought I'd fall over. She asked if I had to work again today, if I was still on the big project. Katie had told her I'd been at work all weekend. I looked at my daughter, then at the woman behind her, standing at the stove like she hadn't just lit a match and dropped it on everything we built. "Can we talk?" Katie asked quietly, nodding toward the hallway. I followed her into our bedroom, the same room where she'd once whispered promises that clearly meant nothing. She sat down on the bed and motioned for me to do the same. I stayed standing. "What do you want from me?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. A second chance. It was the way she said it. Not desperate, not teary-eyed, just flat, like she was ordering another drink at a bar and expected it to be delivered. No apologies? No explanation. She tilted her head. "I already told you." It got boring. "I made a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I said. "It was a decision. Multiple decisions." "I know." Silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. "I want to try to fix it," she said. "For Ellie." That name again. As if Ellie was a shield she could hold up every time her lies started falling apart. So I asked her the question that had been rotting in the back of my mind since the minute I saw those texts. "Do you love him?" She looked up, blinked, and then she made a sound I will never forget. She laughed. Not loud, not cruel, but a short, dismissive puff of air through her nose. The kind of laugh people make when someone asks a dumb question. "Of course not," she said. "He was just exciting." That's when I realized. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't conflicted. She was bored, and bored people don't regret the chaos they cause. They regret getting caught. "I'm not staying here," I told her. "I'll get a place. I'll see Ellie. But I'm not sleeping under the same roof as you." She stood up, took a step closer. Her voice dropped. "If you tell her why you're leaving, you'll mess her up." That was the threat. Soft, sharp, dressed up as concern. And I knew then I wasn't married to a broken person. I was married to a manipulator. A smooth, practiced one. So I nodded, said nothing, walked out of the room. But inside, something was already changing. A fire was building. And it wasn't rage. It was strategy. I spent the next 3 nights at a budget motel off the highway, the kind with thin walls and louder silence. I didn't unpack. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed with the TV on mute, watching news anchors move their mouths while my mind played and replayed the same scenes like a cursed loop. Her towel on the floor, the text messages, that laugh when I asked if she loved him. On the second night, I got a call from my daughter. Katie put her on the phone like a hostage negotiator trying to smooth things over. Ellie asked if I was still working. I lied, told her I had to go on a trip for a project. Her voice got small when she asked when I'd be home. That shattered something in me. I knew I had to get ahead of this. I couldn't let Katie control the story. So I called a lawyer. Not some TV ad billboard guy, an actual recommended, cutthroat divorce attorney who specialized in high-conflict custody cases. I booked the consult, paid the retainer, and I told him everything. He took notes, asked sharp, surgical questions. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "If what you're saying is true, we're going to be just fine." The next day, I drove back to the house while Katie was at work. I used the garage code. I didn't take much, just documents, my laptop, a few clothes, my late dad's watch, Ellie's favorite stuffed animal that she always made me keep in my car when we went out together. I wasn't running. I was repositioning. Later that night, Katie texted me. "You can't just sneak in and take stuff. We need to talk again. Please." She didn't get it yet. She still thought this was a negotiation. She still thought she could bait me into coming back with the right combination of guilt and, for Ellie, lines. But I was done with dialogue. She had her stage. Now it was mine. The next morning, I arranged a meeting at the park with Katie. Neutral ground. Public space. I told her I'd bring coffee. She showed up dressed like she was auditioning for a forgiveness scene. Light makeup, gentle colors, soft voice. "You look tired," she said. "You look comfortable," I answered. We sat. I told her I'd retained a lawyer, that I wasn't going to make this a circus, but I wasn't going to be played either, that I had copies of her messages and proof she lied about the trip. Her eyes narrowed. Not fear. Annoyance. "So that's where we're going now?" she said. "Lawyers. Where we're going is honesty," I said. "Something you gave up months ago." Then I laid out the terms. I'd go for joint custody. No child support either way if we kept it 50-50. I had no interest in the house. I'd let her buy me out or sell it and split. But I wouldn't tolerate manipulation. If she started planting ideas in Ellie's head, if she tried to rewrite the story, I'd push for sole custody and take it to court. She listened, nodded, picked at her nail. Then, quietly, like she was commenting on the weather, "You really think you're gonna look like the good guy in this?" That's when it hit me. She didn't just cheat. She expected to keep me in her orbit. She thought she could betray me, watch me crumble, then slowly guide me back with guilt and a few fake tears. She never imagined I'd walk away with clarity instead of rage. So I said the one thing that finally cracked her mask. "You should start telling people the truth now. That you didn't get caught cheating. You got caught underestimating me." Her jaw twitched. Her coffee sat untouched. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stared like a gambler who just realized the cards aren't in her favor anymore. I stood up. "Tell Ellie I'll see her Tuesday," I said. "And Katie, don't call me unless it's about her." And I walked away. Not victorious. Not healed. But free. For the first time in years. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath all the wreckage, I felt something new beginning to flicker. Resolve. Ellie opened the door before I could knock. Her hair was a mess of tiny braids, probably done by Katie's cousin, who always tried too hard to be the cool aunt. She flung her arms around me and said, "Daddy, I missed you so bad." I swallowed everything in my throat. Anger, sadness, that raw ache of knowing a 6-year-old was stuck in a storm she didn't cause. I knelt down, held her face in my hands and said, "I missed you more." Katie appeared behind her, wearing one of those smiles that only fools and liars believe. I didn't look at her. I asked Ellie to grab her coat and backpack. As she ran off, Katie leaned against the doorframe and whispered, "She doesn't know anything." "I know," I replied. "But you do." She didn't reply to that. We got in the car. Ellie told me about school, how a boy in her class named Marcus got gum stuck in his hair and had to get a weird haircut. She laughed, and I let it wash over me like medicine. I nodded and asked follow-up questions, holding on to normalcy like it was my last oxygen tank. We went to my new place. Bare, boxy, still smelling like fresh paint. I'd gotten a tiny 2-bedroom in a complex near her school. Simple but clean. I let her pick which room would be hers, and she chose the one with the window facing the pool. That night I made spaghetti, burnt the garlic bread. We laughed about it. She spilled juice on the carpet, and we cleaned it together with too many paper towels. It was chaos. It was real. It was ours. After she fell asleep, clutching her stuffed fox and snoring like a baby dragon, I sat in the living room and stared at my phone. Katie hadn't texted, but he had. That was the twist. I didn't recognize the number. The message was short. "You're not the victim you think you are. Ask her about March 12th. No name. No context. I read it 5 times. March 12th. That was the night Katie had gone to that overnight training for work. The one she claimed was mandatory and non-refundable. I remembered it only because I'd taken Ellie to the Science Museum that day and we'd ended up stuck in traffic for 2 hours behind a flaming mattress truck. I stared at the message, then checked the time. 12:47 a.m. I should have ignored it. Instead, I responded, "Who is this?" No reply. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Nothing. I texted again. "If you know something, say it." Still nothing. The next morning, I dropped Ellie off and drove to Katie's work. I didn't go in. I just waited outside in the parking lot, watched her walk out for her break like she hadn't scorched earth 2 weeks ago. She was laughing with a coworker, checking her phone. I waited until she was alone, then stepped out of the car. She flinched when she saw me, covered it with a smile. "I didn't expect you here. I didn't expect him to message me." That killed the smile. She straightened up, crossed her arms. "What are you talking about?" I held out my phone. March 12th. Her eyes didn't move. Not to the left. Not up. She just blinked once and said, "I don't know what that means. Try again." She looked past me, scanning for an exit. Was that another just one night? Or was he special too? She stepped closer. Her voice dropped. "You need to let this go. We agreed not to drag this through the mud for Ellie's sake." I nodded. Then I said, You didn't just cheat. You curated it. You picked dates, places, excuses. You layered lies on top of lies. Don't wrap that in a blanket of concern for our daughter. You cared more about your thrills than your own family. She didn't deny it. She just exhaled sharply, like she was tired of the conversation. Like I was the one dragging this out. Then she said something that didn't land the way she thought it would. You were never supposed to find out. That was the point. And just like that, I understood the depth of it. It wasn't the affair that broke us. It was her complete belief that I didn't matter enough to worry about. I got back in the car without another word. But the storm wasn't over. Because now I had a new question. Who the hell sent me that message? And what else did I not know? The number didn't text again. I tried calling it 3 times that night. Straight to voicemail. No name, no message, just silence. I ran it through a reverse lookup burner phone. Disposable. That only made it worse. Whoever this was had something to lose. Or something they wanted me to see without being seen themselves. And they knew about March 12th. Which meant they knew Katie. Intimately. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, mentally combing every conversation. Every vague excuse. Every weird night when Katie came home humming songs I never heard her play in our car. I wasn't looking for proof. I'd already seen enough to poison a lifetime. I was looking for the pattern. And it was there. Hiding in plain sight. March 12. The mandatory training was held downtown at the Hilton Conference Wing. I checked the Hilton site. There was a nursing seminar that day. But it was a one-day event. No overnight. No hotel stay needed. And the listed instructors? I recognized one name. Ben. Ben, the overly friendly ER tech who used to flirt with her in front of me at company barbecues. The guy who always brought his own special salsa to parties and bragged about how his abs were still visible after 2 kids. I never liked Ben. He had that fake humble energy, like he was constantly auditioning for attention. I opened my laptop and did the thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I went back through Katie's social media. Old photos, likes, comments. I wasn't looking for jealousy. I was hunting for inconsistencies. And sure enough, buried under a photo of a nursing group selfie from that day, Katie and 2 other women, I saw it. A reflection in the mirror behind them. Ben, shirtless, sitting on the edge of the bed. The post had been up for a year. A full damn year. Couldn't breathe. She hadn't just lied. She had archived her betrayal. Left little breadcrumbs in plain sight like she wanted me to find them eventually. Like some twisted, delayed confession. And the worst part? None of it even looked hidden. It wasn't coded or encrypted. It was just uncaring. By mid-morning, I was vibrating with something between fury and obsession. I dropped Ellie at school, and instead of going to work, I drove to the Hilton. I asked to see the check-in log for March 12th. Claimed I lost a receipt. They asked for a name. I gave them Katie's. Nothing. I gave them Ben's. They found him. Checked in under his name. 2 guests. I asked for a printout. They refused. I didn't push it. I already had what I needed. Katie didn't go to a conference. She got a room under his name and didn't even have the decency to be clever about it. Later that day, when I picked up Ellie, I waited until she was buckled in and distracted with her tablet. Then I texted Katie. I know about Ben. I know about the Hilton. Tell me who sent the message. 10 minutes passed. Then, I don't know. I haven't spoken to him since the seminar. Stop digging. It's not healthy. I didn't respond. Because that was another lie. She hadn't spoken to him? She'd liked one of his gym selfies last week. Commented with a fire emoji 2 days before I found out about the affair. She was still in contact. I was watching someone unravel in real time, and she didn't even care enough to tighten the mask. So I did something impulsive. I created a fake profile. One with no photos, no followers. Just a burner name and a private inbox. I messaged Ben directly. I know what happened on March 12th. We need to talk. For her sake. I didn't expect a reply, but he read it within an hour. And then 3 dots appeared. He was typing. And what he said changed everything. You have no idea who you're married to. I stared at that message like it had teeth. You have no idea who you're married to. My first instinct was that Ben was just flexing, trying to rattle me. The smug gym guy routine, trying to reclaim the power I'd snatched away by confronting the whole mess. But something about that line didn't feel like gloating. It felt off, like he was warning me, like he knew something I hadn't even begun to imagine. I sat with it for a full hour before replying. Then tell me. I want the truth. No response. 10 minutes. 20. Nothing. Then, just when I was ready to give up, he sent another message. Short, but sharp enough to carve the ground out from under me. Check her work calendar. Look at October 3rd. Now I was deep in it. I'd passed the point of no return days ago. But this was different. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about layers. There was more under the surface, and this guy was nudging me toward it like he couldn't carry it alone anymore. October 3rd. I knew that date. It rang a bell, but not for anything major. Katie told me she had a double shift that day. That Ellie was with her cousin for the night because she didn't want to leave her with a sitter too late. I remembered that because I had planned to surprise her. Bought Thai food from her favorite spot. Even chilled that awful almond sparkling wine she liked. She never showed. Called at 11:40 p.m. Said she was stuck at work. That she'd eat it cold when she got home. Except now, I opened her old laptop. The one she used before she switched to her new work-issued one. It was still in the closet, still logged in under her old profile. I hadn't touched it since before the fallout. I dug into the calendar app. Searched October 3rd. There it was. Booking confirmed. The Gablewood House. I clicked. The Gablewood House. A bed and breakfast out in the countryside. Cozy. Isolated. Not the kind of place you go after a double shift in a hospital. I copied the confirmation email, traced it back. She had used her personal email, not the work one. 2 nights. King Suite. Under her name. Guest. Katie plus M. Rowan. My stomach flipped. I didn't know any Rowan. Not a coworker. Not a friend. Definitely not a family member. I searched the name on social media. A few hits. One stood out, a man in his 40s. Private profile. But the mutual friends? 2 of them worked at Katie's hospital. I went back to her messages. Not just the texts. Her old Facebook DMs. There, under archived, buried behind years of forgotten chats and shallow conversations, were messages from Mark Rowan. They started out clinical, polite, a shared patient case. Then came the emojis, the late-night typing, the I needed to talk to someone lines, voice notes, photos of coffee mugs, sunrises, sunsets, then a photo of his hand on her knee, captioned, "Finally, just us." My head went quiet. Mark wasn't just another affair. He was the first one. Ben was a detour. Mark was the blueprint. She'd been doing this for longer than I thought. She'd built a system, an alibi factory. Friends, co-workers, real events overlapped with false ones. Her world was a maze where every path looped back to me, still believing I had a wife worth fighting for. And Ben wasn't even angry. He was scared. He wasn't warning me because he felt guilty. He was warning me because he saw what happened to the last guy. I texted him again. Was Mark the first? His reply was instant. He thought he was the only. Then another. He tried to confront her. A week later, he transferred to another hospital out of state. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. Now I understood. Katie wasn't reckless. She was good at this. And whatever she said to Mark, whatever happened that week, scared him enough to disappear. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, staring at a version of my life that had never existed. A marriage built on ash. A woman who wore loyalty like a costume. The storm wasn't over. It had just reached its I couldn't sit still. Every object in the apartment felt foreign, like it belonged to a stranger. The couch, the bookshelf, even the framed picture of Ellie and me at the zoo. Her on my shoulders, ice cream on her nose. Felt like a prop from a life someone else was pretending to live. I kept going over the name Mark Rowan. The way Ben said he vanished. That wasn't guilt. That was damage control. And suddenly, I couldn't stop wondering, what did Katie do to him? I pulled up the staff directory of her hospital. No Mark Rowan. Not in the ER, not in internal medicine. I called a friend who still worked in administration. Someone I'd helped move into their apartment 3 years ago. He owed me a favor. When I asked casually about Mark, the line went quiet. Then he said, he transferred out last year. It was weird. He didn't even clean out his locker. Just sent a resignation email and bounced. I asked if anything happened. Another pause. Then he said, he and Katie had some tension. That's all I'll say. Tension. Corporate speak for something went sideways. And suddenly, I was looking at a woman I didn't just not recognize. I was realizing I never knew. Every fight, every apology, every I love you said with her head on my chest might have been just part of her choreography. Practiced, performed, refined. She wasn't sloppy. She was meticulous. I started digging into Mark. News articles, obituaries, anything. Finally found him on LinkedIn, new job, new city, new last name. He changed it. Slightly. Enough to slip past casual searches. But his photo was still up, older now. Tired. But him. I debated messaging him. What would I even say? Hey, I think we got burned by the same woman. Mind comparing notes. It sounded insane. But this wasn't about comparison. It was about pattern. And if she'd erased him like this, what did that say about how far she'd go to protect her lies? I messaged him. Mark, I know this is out of nowhere. I think you knew Katie last name. I'm her ex-husband. I don't want anything from you. Just the truth. If something happened, I need to know. No response. I waited 3 hours. Started doubting myself. Maybe I crossed a line. Maybe he'd block me. Then a reply came through. 2 lines. She'll ruin you if you get too close. Walk away while you can. That's not a warning you give about a fling. That's a warning you give about a calculated threat. I tried to reply. The message didn't go through. He had blocked me, which meant he wasn't just scared of her. He was still running. That night, I picked Ellie up from school. She was chatty, full of stories about a new art project and how one kid brought 2 juice boxes and gave her one. I tried to smile, tried to keep my voice steady. But when she asked, "Are you and Mommy friends again yet?" something inside me cracked. I didn't lie. I said, "No, sweetheart, we're not. But that's okay." She looked at me for a long time, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Then she nodded and went back to her drawing. Later, after I put her to bed, I sat in the dark and stared at the ceiling. Katie didn't cheat out of loneliness. She didn't cheat because something was broken between us. She cheated because it was sport. Because manipulation was the only thing that made her feel alive. And now, like any cornered liar, she was unpredictable. I didn't know if she'd try to turn Ellie against me. I didn't know what kind of damage she was capable of when exposed. But I knew one thing. She hadn't lost yet, because she still thought she was ahead. And that's what I was about to take from her. Not with rage. Not with violence. With control. Piece by piece, the mask was slipping. And I was going to be the one to rip it off in front of everyone. The plan came together in fragments. I wasn't trying to destroy her. That would make me just another bitter ex-husband ranting into the void. I didn't want to scorch the earth because Ellie was still walking on it. No, I wanted something more dangerous than revenge. I wanted exposure. Because the only thing Katie couldn't control was other people knowing who she really was. I started with the calendar. Every lie she told me was neatly mapped out in her old schedules. Every overnight shift, every girls' trip, every on-call day. I matched those against hotel receipts, social media posts, even timestamps from Ben's messages and the ones I'd found in her archived Facebook DMs. It all lined up like pieces from a jigsaw puzzle she didn't think I'd ever be smart or broken enough to finish. I printed it all. One binder. Clean. No commentary. Just dates, locations, names. Then I drafted a letter. Not angry. Not pleading. Just factual. Cold. Surgical. I sent it to her supervisor anonymously. No threats. No requests. Just documentation that a nurse under her management had been falsifying her availability, misusing time off, and engaging in unprofessional relationships with subordinates during work hours. I didn't stop there. I sent copies of the same binder, scrubbed of any personal spite, to HR, and another to the hospital's ethics board. Because here's the thing. Katie wasn't just playing games at home. She was violating professional boundaries, pulling strings, getting shift swaps under false pretenses, and manipulating entire teams to cover her tracks. She thought her secrets were buried. But I gave them roots. Let them grow into the very places she thought she was untouchable. And then I waited. It didn't take long. One morning, during a school drop-off, Katie showed up in a different car. Her face was tight, her eyes twitchy behind her sunglasses. She barely looked at me, handed over Ellie's lunchbox with a flat, rehearsed smile. She was unraveling. That afternoon, a mutual acquaintance, another nurse, texted me, "What the hell happened? Katie got pulled into admin for something big. Everyone's whispering about misconduct." I didn't reply. The next day, Katie showed up early at my apartment. Unannounced. She didn't knock. She banged. I opened the door. Ellie was at school. The air between us felt thin, ready to snap. She pushed past me without a word. Her eyes were wild, not crying, panicked. "You think you're clever?" I didn't answer. "You're trying to destroy me," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "You did it to yourself," I said. "I just stopped protecting the version of you you wanted everyone else to see." "You told the hospital? You think I won't fight back?" "Fight all you want," I said. "But the truth's already out. You're not a victim here. You're not misunderstood. You're exposed." She paced the living room like an animal in a cage. Then she stopped and pointed at me. "I could ruin you too. Don't think for a second I won't." I stepped forward, calm. "You already tried. You lied to our daughter. You slept with your coworkers. You manipulated everyone around you because boredom makes you dangerous. You think I'm scared of what you'll do now?" She stared at me, breathing hard. Then her voice dropped, almost a whisper. "She still loves me more." There it was. The knife. The last card. Not power. Not guilt. But possession. She thought Ellie was leverage. I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "She loves who she thinks you are. But that won't last. Because you can't keep the mask on forever." She didn't reply. She just stood there, silent, cornered. And I realized, for the first time, she had no script for this. She didn't know how to fight someone who didn't want her back. Who didn't cry. Who didn't beg. Who just let her collapse under the weight of her own lies. She left without another word. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I knew she wasn't done. But she was losing. And she knew it. The final part came quieter than I expected. Not with shouting. Not with some final dramatic twist. Just the slow, suffocating sound of someone being forced to live in the reality they created. A week after her outburst at my apartment, I got a formal letter from the hospital. Not addressed to me, but it made its way into my hands through a mutual connection. Katie was being placed under internal investigation. Administrative leave. Allegations of policy violations, inappropriate conduct, and ethical breaches tied to misuse of work time and relationships with staff. The binder had done its job. I never even signed my name. She tried to spin it, of course. Told people it was a misunderstanding. Said someone hacked her schedule. I didn't care. I wasn't trying to ruin her career. I was trying to strip away the illusion. The one she wore like armor. The one she used to convince people she was flawless, generous, brilliant. All I did was hold up a mirror. Let her reflection do the damage. She texted me once more. One line. "You'll regret this." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. If she meant she'd try to use Ellie against me, she already had. If she meant she'd come for me legally, I had proof for every claim, every lie. She wasn't a threat anymore. She was noise. Distant. Fading. The real power was in what I didn't do. I didn't drag her name through the dirt publicly. I didn't scream at her in front of Ellie. I didn't post receipts online or ask her friends to pick sides. I starved her of the drama she used to thrive on. And without it, she started to disappear. That's what people like her hate the most. Not being hated. Being ignored. Being irrelevant. As weeks turned into months, the silence grew. Her texts became fewer. The mask slipped further. Ellie started asking fewer questions. The transition between our homes smoothed out. She stopped trying to control the story because no one was listening anymore. Not even her own daughter, who now quietly noticed when promises were broken, when smiles were fake, when love came with strings. And me? I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean, like I had finally washed her from the fabric of my life. There's this moment that sticks with me. A couple of weeks ago, I was walking with Ellie in the park, and she suddenly asked, "Daddy, do grown-ups lie a lot?" I froze. I looked at her and said, "Sometimes, but not all of them." She nodded like she already knew that. Then she said, I like how you always tell the truth, even when it's not fun. And right there, that was the end of the story. Not the confrontation, not the secrets, not the lies or the betrayals. It was that moment, that sentence, the realization that I hadn't just survived her. I protected something real, something bigger than revenge or justice or ego. I had protected my daughter from becoming like her mother. If I have any advice to offer, if any of this mess finds someone who's standing at the same cliff's edge I once stood on, it's this: don't waste your soul trying to make sense of people who feed on chaos. Don't chase closure from someone who wouldn't recognize honesty if it sat in their lap and screamed. Don't let their betrayal define your story. Use it to sharpen your clarity. Use it to write your own ending. And if you do it right, they vanish, long before the ink dries.